The mop water had gone gray by the time the lights changed color. And I remember thinking it was strange that the floor noticed before I did. The fluorescents along corridor S4 dropped from their usual cold white to a deep amber that the maintenance handbook called soft containment. And I stood there with the wringer handle in my fist, watching my own shadow stretch on the polished concrete like something pulled out long by hand. My radio chirped once, then went silent. The hum of the ventilation, the same hum I'd listened to every night for 2 years and 4 months, dropped half an octave and held there. That's the part nobody ever talks about when they tell stories like this. It isn't the screaming that tells you something is wrong. It's the quiet adjustments in the things that aren't supposed to adjust at all. My name's Wendrick Plone, and for the record, I was a Tier 3 sanitation contractor inside a facility that does not officially exist. I won't pretend I knew what they were doing in the rooms I cleaned. I emptied the bins, I scrubbed the showers in the decontamination bays. I ran a buffer over the floors between 0200 and 0600, and I went home to a single wide in Rachel and slept until the sun came back. They paid in direct deposit through a shell logistics company in Henderson, and I signed an NDA so thick it had its own table of contents. I'm telling you this now because the people who could prosecute me for telling it are either dead, missing, or sitting in a hearing room pretending none of it happened. Whichever of those three is true, I figure my exposure is roughly the same. The handbook said amber meant a partial containment event in a non-adjacent sector, and that contracted personnel should remain in place, secure all carts and chemicals, and await instruction from a uniformed officer. I'd seen amber twice in 2 years. Once was a deer that got into the perimeter through a culvert. The other was a stuck door in the bioimaging wing that triggered the system because somebody bumped a sensor with a pallet jack. Both times the lights went back to white inside 20 minutes, and somebody from security came by to sign my clipboard. So I parked the mop bucket against the wall, sat down on an overturned milk crate I wasn't supposed to have, and waited. 20 minutes came and went. Then 40. The amber didn't change. At the 1 hour mark, a low tone started pulsing from the speaker grills in the ceiling. 3 short, 1 long, 3 short. And the magnetic locks on the corridor doors at both ends of S4 engaged with a sound I'd never heard them make. Heavy. Final. Like a safe closing. I stood up. I tried the radio again. Nothing but a soft hiss that wasn't quite static, more like wind blowing across the open mouth of a jar. I walked to the south door and put my badge against the reader. The reader didn't beep. It didn't flash red either. It just sat there, blank, like it had never been turned on. That was when I started to be afraid. In a small, organized way. Not the big animal fear. The little administrative fear. The one that says you have stepped outside the procedure, and the procedure is what was keeping you employed. I'd worked S4 for the last 11 months. It was a service corridor between 2 restricted labs I'd never been inside, only behind. The walls were poured concrete on the lab side, drywall on mine. And the maintenance closet at the midpoint held cleaning chemicals, spare bulbs, a wet-dry vac, and a wall-mounted phone the orientation video had told me to use only in the event of injury. I went to the phone. I picked up the receiver. There was a dial tone, a real one, not a recording, and I felt better for about 2 seconds. Then a voice came on, female, calm, recorded, saying that all internal lines were temporarily routed to facility operations and to please hold. I held. The hold music was a single sustained tone that did not change pitch. I held for what my watch said was 8 minutes, and then the line clicked dead. I tried my cell. I knew it wouldn't work. They didn't work past the second checkpoint, ever. But I tried it anyway because that's what you do. The screen showed emergency calls only, and refused to make those either. I sat back down on the crate and tried to think. Whatever was happening, it was happening in a sector that wasn't mine, and the building was sealing itself by zones the way it was designed to. The handbook was specific about this part. In the event of extended containment, contracted personnel were to remain in their assigned area, ration any available water from sinks, and avoid attempting to access locked sections. The word extended had never been defined. I'd asked once during onboarding, and the woman running the session had smiled the way people smile when they don't intend to answer. The amber held for 2 more hours before the first scream. It came from beyond the north door, muffled through enough concrete that I couldn't tell whether it was a man or a woman, only that it was a human throat doing something a human throat doesn't normally agree to do. The sound went on for longer than I'd have thought possible, then stopped. Not faded, stopped. Like somebody had cut the wire. After that, I heard footsteps. Slow, irregular. The heel drag of a person walking who hasn't decided yet whether they're walking. They passed the north door and went on. Then more footsteps, faster. Then a thud against the door itself that shook the frame and rattled the bulb in the maintenance closet. Then nothing. I picked up the wet dry vax metal extension wand because it was the heaviest thing in the closet that wasn't a chemical, and I went to the south end of the corridor and sat against the wall with the wand across my knees. I told myself I was doing it because the handbook said to remain calm, and I was being calm. The truth is, I didn't know what else to put my hands on. The lights flickered around the 3-hour mark and switched again, this time to a red that wasn't the bright red of a fire alarm, but a deep, almost black red, the color of clotted blood under a streetlight. The handbook didn't list this one. I'd never seen it. The pulsing tone from the speakers changed to a single long note, sustained, and a recorded voice, male this time, and not the same recording I'd heard on the phone, said, "Personnel within affected zones are advised to remain stationary. Recovery teams have been dispatched." It said that 3 times. Then it stopped, and the corridor was just me and the buzz of the speakers and the hum of the ventilation, which had now dropped another half octave and sounded almost organic, like something breathing slow through a long throat. The south door opened. It opened from the inside of the locked section, not from my side, and the man who came through it was wearing the gray coverall of a Tier 2 technician, with his badge clipped to the breast pocket and the badge upside down. His face was wet. Not bloody, wet, like he'd been splashed with water and hadn't wiped it off. He stepped through the doorway, and the door sealed behind him with the same heavy sound it had made when it locked. And he stood there, blinking at the amber, then red corridor, like he wasn't sure which way the floor was tilted. I said his name before I meant to. "Burl?" His badge said B. Kostranich. I'd seen him in the break room maybe a dozen times. He drank his coffee black and read paperback westerns, and once gave me a granola bar when the vending machine ate my $1. He turned his head toward me, slow, the way a security camera turns when it's running on an old motor. "Wendrick." His voice was correct. That's the only word I have for it. Correct. Like a recording of his voice played back at the right speed, but in the wrong room. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," I told him. "The door's locked." "You shouldn't be here," he said again. Then he smiled, and the smile was wrong in a way I didn't have language for at the time, and barely do now. It used all the right muscles in the wrong order. The corners of his mouth pulled up before his eyes acknowledged anything, and then his eyes, and I want you to hear this exactly. His eyes did not look at me. They looked through me at the wall behind me and tracked something there that I could not see. I stood up slowly with the wand in my hand and started backing along the corridor toward the maintenance closet. He didn't move at first. He just stood in the doorway, smiling the wrong smile, his head tilted a few degrees off vertical. Then he reached up and unclipped his badge from his pocket, and he held it out toward me like he was offering it. The badge was wet, too. There was something on the lanyard that wasn't blood and wasn't water. A kind of dark sheen like the surface of a film of oil, and it moved against the plastic in a way that liquids do not usually move. "Take it," he said. "You'll need it." I didn't take it. I went into the maintenance closet and I shut the door, and I locked it with the deadbolt the orientation video had told me was for chemical spill containment. I heard him walk down the corridor outside, slow, unhurried. He didn't try the door. He didn't say anything else. After about 2 minutes, I heard the north door cycle and he was gone. I sat in the closet with my back against the metal shelves and the wand across my lap, and I tried to make my breathing match the ventilation. It took longer than I want to admit. Around the 4-hour mark, and you have to understand, I was looking at my watch every 90 seconds at this point, so I knew the timing exactly. Somebody knocked on the closet door. 3 knocks, spaced. The kind of knock a manager makes. "Sanitation, this is Major Hespen Drews. Can you confirm you're inside?" The voice was tired and clipped and irritated and absolutely human in a way Burl's voice hadn't been. I said yes. I said my name and my contractor ID. I said I'd been instructed to remain in place and that I was complying. I said it fast, because I'd learned in 2 years that the only thing the uniformed side of this place liked less than a question was a contractor with an opinion. "Open the door, Plone. We're consolidating." I opened the door. Drews was a stocky man in his 50s, with a gray brush of hair and the kind of face that had been told it was disappointing for so long it had started to agree. He was in the dark utility uniform of internal security, with a sidearm on his hip and a short-barreled rifle slung across his chest. Behind him in the corridor were 3 other people. A woman in a white lab coat over a turtleneck, holding a tablet to her chest like a shield. A younger man in the same gray coverall Burl had been wearing, with a bandage wrapped around his left forearm, and a tall, thin woman in the dark blue of facility operations, with a radio on her belt that wasn't making any noise. "Grab anything in there that burns or cuts," Drews told me. "We're moving to Substation 12. Fall in behind Petra." The woman in the lab coat nodded at me without smiling. The bandaged man didn't look up. The thin woman, Petra evidently, turned and started walking toward the south door without waiting to see if I followed. I grabbed a 5-pound jug of industrial disinfectant, a box cutter from the shelf, and a long-handled flashlight that I'd been told a year ago was for emergencies and had never once used. I fell in behind Petra. Drews took the back. The lab coat and the bandaged man were between us. "Don't talk in the corridor," Drews said behind me. "It hears talking." I want to be very clear that I noted that pronoun and I did not ask about it. The south door cycled when Petra waved a black keycard at the reader. It opened onto a stretch of corridor I had never been allowed in. A long, sloping hallway with poured concrete walls and floor and ceiling, lit by the same deep red, with a dust-thin smear along the right-hand wall about waist-high that I tried not to look directly at, because looking at it made my eyes water and the back of my throat taste like pennies. We walked for maybe 4 minutes, in a silence I have rarely experienced in any building. The kind of silence where you can hear the rubber of your own boot rolling off the concrete. Once, the bandaged man stopped, turned his head halfway toward the wall, and listened. Drews put a hand flat against his back and pushed him forward without a word. He went. At the end of the corridor was an unmarked door with a keypad. Petra punched in a code with her body angled to block the keypad from me. The door opened on a room about the size of a two-car garage, with bench seating along 3 walls, a metal table in the center, 2 locker banks, a sink, and a heavy hatch at the back that looked like the door to a meat freezer. There were already 3 people inside. A bald man in a brown tweed jacket, somewhere north of 60, with the rumpled look of a person who had been pulled away from a desk he'd been comfortable at for a very long time. A wiry young woman with her hair in a tight braid, in the green flight suit of the airborne support side of the operation, with a holstered pistol I noticed she kept her hand near. And a kid, and I mean kid no older than 22, in the maroon polo and khakis of one of the civilian engineering contractors, holding a thermos like it was the only thing in the world he was sure of. "This is everyone we could pull from S Block and below," Petra told the bald man. "Drews thinks the recovery teams are gone." "The recovery teams are gone," Drews corrected behind me. He didn't elaborate. The bald man looked at me. "Who's this?" "Sanitation," Drews said. "Cleared for what?" "Tier 3. The bald man sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose between 2 fingers, hard enough to leave a mark. "Wonderful. All right, sit down, son. My name is Oberon Pixley. I'm a senior researcher, and I'm going to violate roughly 9 federal statutes in the next sentence. We are not dealing with a pathogen." I sat down. "This started," he said, "in Vault 41B, which is a containment chamber for an object we have had in this facility since 1959 and which has, until tonight, been entirely inert. The object is approximately the size of a fire hydrant. It is dark gray. It is not made of any element on the periodic table that we have been able to confidently identify. For 66 years, it has done absolutely nothing." "And tonight?" the woman with the braid asked. Her voice was low and even. "Tonight, at 21:14, it began emitting." Pixley paused. "I'm using the word loosely. There is no electromagnetic signature, no radiation, no vibration we can measure. But the personnel monitoring it, and one of them was my deputy, who I have known for 19 years, those personnel began behaving in ways that are not consistent with their continued cognitive autonomy. The first symptom was a refusal to look away from the object. The second was a refusal to speak in their own voices. The third—" He stopped. He looked at the floor. "The third was bites." The bandaged man on the bench across from me made a small sound in his throat. I looked at his bandage and didn't ask. "It is not transmissible by blood," Pixley went on, "as far as we have been able to determine. It is transmissible by proximity to the object and this is the part I want everyone in this room to hold tightly. It appears to be transmissible by proximity to people who have been near the object, like a candle lighting another candle. We do not know the range. We have working estimates between 3 meters and 30, depending on duration of exposure. The affected do not appear to be dead. They are not bleeding out. They are not decomposing. They are simply," he searched for the word, "occupied." "By what?" the bald engineering kid asked. He had not let go of his thermos. "By something that is using their bodies the way a hand uses a glove," Pixley said. "I am not being poetic. I am describing what we have observed on the monitors. The motor function is intact. The autonomic systems are intact. Higher cognition is—" He made a gesture, half a shrug and half a wave. "Edited." Nobody said anything for a long moment. Drews finally broke it. "We've lost contact with the surface," he said. "All external comms are dark. The main blast doors at the elevator shaft are sealed, and I don't have override. We're in a substation that has its own air supply and a backup generator with about 18 hours of fuel. There is a service tunnel from this room down to sublevel 9. And from sublevel 9, there is an old maintenance shaft that comes up about a mile north of the main gate. That shaft hasn't been used since the early 80s. I don't know what condition it's in. I don't know if it's clear. I do know that it is the only way out of this building that does not require us to walk through Vault 41B's containment ring. "How many people are still alive down here?" the lab coat woman asked. She hadn't spoken since we'd entered. "Down here, in this substation," Drews said. 8, including the contractor. "In the building above us, unknown. The cameras are still working in some sectors. I watched 2 engineers from the geothermal team get cornered in the cafeteria by what used to be the night shift 20 minutes ago. I am not going to describe what I saw, because describing it does not help us, and because the people in that cafeteria were my friends." He said the last part flat, without emphasis, and that flatness was worse than if he'd cracked. "So we go down," the woman with the braid said. "We go down," Drews agreed. That was the plan. Down to sublevel 9 through a service tunnel none of us had been in, then up through a maintenance shaft none of us had inspected, then out into the desert, where, with luck, somebody on the outside had figured out something was wrong and was waiting to receive us. With less luck, the desert would be empty and we'd be on foot. We packed in maybe 20 minutes. There were 2 more sidearms in the locker bank, and Drews handed one to Petra and kept the other for himself, which left the rest of us with whatever we'd brought in. The lab coat woman, whose name was Mirel Otsegovich, and who I would learn was a behavioral neurologist, took a flashlight and a folding utility knife and refused a pistol when Drews offered it. The bandaged man, whose name was Yael Henneker, took a length of pipe from under the sink and held it across his lap and stared at the floor. The engineering kid, Cassian Jobst, 21 years old, 6 weeks out of his degree, in the worst night of his life, took a hammer from a toolbox and a roll of electrical tape and put both in his pockets. Petra Sundermark, the operations woman, didn't take anything new. She had her key card and her radio and a small folding knife I noticed when she opened it to scrape something off her boot. And Pixley, the senior researcher, took nothing. He stood by the back hatch with his hands in the pockets of his tweed jacket and his eyes far away. I watched him for a moment and decided he was the most dangerous person in the room. Not because I thought he meant us harm, because I thought he was the only one of us who actually understood what had just stepped sideways into our reality. And people who understand are sometimes willing to make trades the rest of us wouldn't. The hatch opened on a metal ladder going down into a concrete shaft. The ladder rungs were cold, almost wet. Drews went first, then Petra, then Mirel, then Jael, then Cassian, then me, then Pixley, with the woman with the braid. Her name was Esme Bechtold, and she'd come up through Air Force Pararescue before being seconded to whatever the facility called its airborne wing, bringing up the rear with the second pistol. The shaft was 30 feet of ladder, and it was the longest 30 feet I have ever climbed. At the bottom was a corridor. The lighting here was original, sodium yellow, and the walls were unpainted concrete with old conduit running along the ceiling. The corridor smelled like cold stone and machine oil, and something else underneath that I didn't recognize. It was not a chemical smell. It wasn't biological either, not exactly. It was the smell, I would think later, of a room that had been closed for too long, with the wrong thing inside it. We walked. Drews set a pace just slightly above ambling, and we kept it without comment. Maybe half a mile in, the corridor branched. Drews took the left fork without hesitating. I didn't ask how he knew, because I'd already decided that asking questions of a man with a rifle in a dark hallway was a luxury I couldn't afford. Around what I think was the 20-minute mark of the walk, Mirel stopped. She didn't say anything. She just stopped and put her hand on the wall. "Doctor," Drews said low. "There's someone behind us," Morel said. We all turned. The corridor behind us was empty as far as the light reached. Past that, it went into a darkness the sodium bulbs couldn't push through. "How do you know?" Esme asked from the back. "I don't," Morel said. "I can feel it on my neck." Pixley's head came up sharply at that, and he looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, "Has anyone here been within line of sight of the vault tonight?" Nobody answered. "I'm going to ask once more," Pixley said, "and then we have a conversation. Has anyone here, at any point in the last 6 hours, been in visual contact with Vault 41B or with personnel known to be inside the containment ring?" I watched Yael Henniker. He was looking at his hands. "Yael?" Pixley said. "I went past it," Yael said. His voice was flat. "On the catwalk. Once." "About 4 hours ago, when I was running a sample down to the south cold room. The door was open. I didn't go in, I looked. For maybe a second, maybe 2. Mirel was very still. "Did anyone touch you after that?" Pixley asked. My partner clipped my arm with a tray. He raised the bandaged forearm. Right after, he apologized. "Where is your partner now?" "He's the reason this bandage is on." Pixley closed his eyes for a moment. "Major," he said, "I think we need to keep walking." "Doctor," Drews began. "I am not advising what you think I am advising," Pixley said sharply. "I am saying that we keep walking, and Mr. Henniker walks ahead of me where I can watch him, and we get to the maintenance shaft, and we make decisions there with better light and more time. I am not advising, Major, I want this said aloud, I am not advising we leave him." "Noted," Drews said. We kept walking. Yael moved up 2 slots in the line. He didn't argue. I noticed that he wasn't sweating, even though the rest of us were starting to. And I noticed his pupils when he glanced sideways at me. They were the same size as each other. They just weren't the size they should have been in sodium light. They were larger. A lot larger. I dropped back half a step so that Pixley was between me and Yael. About 10 minutes after that, we heard the first footsteps behind us. They were not in step with our own. They were softer, slower, and they had the same heel drag I'd heard in S4. Drews raised a fist and the line stopped. Everybody held their breath. The footsteps continued for a beat, then stopped. Whoever was behind us had stopped when we stopped. "Move," Drews said quietly, and we moved. We moved faster. Cassian was breathing hard now, and Morel had taken his arm without seeming to know she'd done it. Petra had her keycard already in her hand for whatever door came next. I had the flashlight in my left hand and the box cutter in my right, and I felt absurd, like a child with a fork going to fight a bear. The corridor opened into a junction with 3 doors. Drews paused. He looked at each door in turn. Petra moved past him and pressed her keycard to the middle one. It clicked, but it didn't open. She tried again. Same result. "Override's been pulled," she said. "Somebody's killing the access from a console." "Pixley?" Drews asked, without turning his head. "Not me," Pixley said. "I haven't been near a console in 3 hours." "Somebody is, though," Drews said. "Somebody who's still cognitively present enough to operate one and not present enough to want us out." Esme, in the back, said the thing nobody had said yet. "Then there are gradations." Pixley nodded slowly. "There are gradations." That was the first thing he'd said all night that scared me more than anything Drews had said. Because gradations meant the people we were walking with might shift positions on whatever scale this thing operated on, and we wouldn't necessarily know when. The left-hand door cycled open under Petra's card. We went through. The corridor beyond was narrower, and the lights were spaced farther apart, so that we walked through pools of yellow with stretches of near dark between. And in each stretch of near dark, I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Cassian spoke for the first time since the substation. Dr. Pixley. Yes? What was the object? Pixley didn't answer right away. We walked another 20 feet through one of the dark stretches and then into the next pool of light. And in that pool of light, he said, "We don't know." Where did it come from? We don't know that either, son. We have a recovery date and a recovery location, and the recovery location is classified above my clearance, which is saying something. We have radiocarbon dates on the soil it was pulled from that put it at older than anything that should have soil on it. We have a working hypothesis that it is not, in the strict sense, an object. Then what is it? A door, Pixley said. We think it is a door. We think that for 66 years it has been a closed door, and that tonight, for reasons we do not understand, it opened. A door to where? That, Pixley said, is the part where my clearance ends and my speculation begins. And I am too tired tonight to speculate. Cassian did not ask anything else. The corridor ended at a heavy steel door set into the concrete, with a wheel handle like a submarine hatch. Drews set his hand on the wheel and looked at us. Past this door is the access tunnel to sublevel 9, he said. It's about 300 yards long, no lights, no side doors. We go through, we keep moving, we do not stop for any sound behind us until we hit the next hatch at the far end. Are we clear? We were clear. He spun the wheel. The door opened on darkness so complete it looked like a wall. Drews clicked on a tactical light mounted to his rifle, and the beam pushed a cone of white into the dark and disappeared. We went in. I don't have a perfect memory of the tunnel. I have fragments. The smell, which was the same closed room smell from the corridor but stronger, with an undertone now of something almost sweet, like fruit gone soft. The sound of our boots, which seemed to echo from too far away, as if the tunnel was longer than 300 yards. The way Drew's flashlight beam caught on motes of dust hanging absolutely still in the air, like the air itself had stopped moving when we entered. Cassian's breathing in front of me, fast and shallow. Pixley's hand on the small of my back at one point, steadying me when I stumbled on something I couldn't see. About halfway through, Jowl stopped. He stopped without sound, the way an actor stops on a stage cue. And Pixley stopped behind him, and the rest of us bunched up. "Mr. Henniker," Pixley said quietly. Jowl didn't answer. He was facing the darkness ahead. His head was tilted just slightly, the same few degrees off vertical that Burl's had been when he'd come through the south door of S4. I could see this only in the bleed of Drew's flashlight from up ahead. Pixley saw it too. I heard him exhale, slow and controlled. "Jowl," Pixley said. "Look at me." Jowl turned his head. His eyes, and I will tell you this with the certainty of a man who has had 4 years to think about it. His eyes did not focus on Pixley's face. They focused on a point about 6 inches behind Pixley's head, and they tracked something there that wasn't there. "Major," Pixley said, without taking his eyes off Jowl. Drews turned back. The flashlight beam swung across us all and settled on Jowl. In the white light, I could see Yowl's face properly for the first time since the substation. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't doing anything. He was just standing there, and his face was the face of a man, and the man was not at home. "How long?" Drews asked, soft. "Minutes," Pixley said. "He was lucid in the substation. He's not lucid now." "Can you bring him back?" "No." The silence that followed lasted maybe 2 seconds. It felt like an hour. "I'm sorry, Mr. Henniker," Drews said. He raised the rifle. "Wait," Mirel said. Drews did not lower the rifle, but he did not fire. "Doctor." "He hasn't done anything." Mirel's voice was thin but steady. "He hasn't moved. Maybe the proximity is the trigger. Maybe if we keep distance." "There are 8 of us, Doctor," Drews said, "in a tunnel 300 yards long, and we cannot outrun him if he decides to run. I am not killing a sick man. I am preventing a propagation." "You don't know it propagates."
Pixley told us it propagates. Pixley told us he doesn't know the range. I want to be clear. I did not say anything during this. I stood in the dark behind Pixley with the box cutter in my hand, and I thought about Burl Kostranich offering me his badge, and I thought about the wet thing on the lanyard moving in a way liquids do not move, and I did not say a word. Jarl Henniker spoke. "Oberon," he said, and his voice was the same correct but wrong voice Burl's had been. "You should not have brought them down here." Pixley's shoulders went stiff. "Why?" "Because," Jarl said, "it can hear better down here. The stone is right. The stone was always right." He smiled, the wrong smile, the muscles in the wrong order. "It thanks you. For 66 years it has been very lonely, and now it is not." Drews fired. The sound in the tunnel was enormous, a flat, hard crack that doubled and tripled off the concrete and rang in my ears for a long time after. Jarl went down.
He didn't stagger. He didn't reach for the wound. He went down the way a marionette goes down when the strings are cut, all at once and without preamble, and he didn't move again. For about 3 breaths, nobody spoke. Then, from behind us, from the way we had come, something laughed. It was not a human laugh. It used a human throat, but the sound that came out of the throat was not a laugh. It was the shape of a laugh, the way Burl's smile had been the shape of a smile. It came from a long way back in the tunnel, and it was followed by footsteps, more than one set, a lot more than one set. "Move," Drews said. "Move, move now, move." We ran. I have never run in such complete darkness in my life. Drews's flashlight cut a moving cone in front of us, and we ran inside that cone. And behind us, the footsteps came faster, and the laughing, and there was more than one voice laughing now, layered, out of sync, got closer. Cassian fell once, and Mirel hauled him up without breaking stride. Esme was firing behind us, single shots, controlled, into the dark. I don't know if she was hitting anything. I don't know if hitting anything mattered. The far hatch came up under Drew's flashlight, like a door appearing out of fog. He hit the wheel handle with both hands and spun it. It spun. The hatch swung. We poured through. Petra was last in besides Esme, and Esme came through firing, walking backwards, and Drews slammed the hatch shut behind her and spun the wheel the other way and threw a lever I hadn't noticed, and somewhere inside the wall a heavy bolt slid home with a sound that felt, for the first time in hours, like safety. We stood in another corridor. This one had emergency lighting, dim and green. We were all breathing too hard to speak. Pixley was bent at the waist with his hands on his knees. Cassian was on the floor. Morel was kneeling next to him with a hand on his back. Petra had her keycard against a reader on the wall, scrolling through something I couldn't see. Esme was reloading. Drews finally straightened. He looked at us, counted us, registered the absence. 8 to 7, he said.
Nobody answered him. There was nothing to answer with.
After a few minutes, when Cassian could stand and Pixley could speak, we kept going. Sublevel 9 was older than anything I'd seen in the facility. The lights here were incandescent, not fluorescent, and they were spaced even farther apart than in the corridor above. The walls were a kind of poured concrete I associated with old Cold War bunkers, with the seams of the formwork still visible. There were doors at intervals, most of them with old-style mechanical locks and frosted glass windows, the kind of doors you see in pre-war office buildings. Some of the glass was broken. None of the rooms had lights on inside. We moved along the corridor in a tighter group than before. Drews had stopped pretending we needed to keep our distance from each other for any reason. He was, I realized, no longer running a containment protocol. He was running an evacuation. Petra's radio crackled once, then went quiet, then crackled again.
"Substation 12 to anyone on this band," a voice said. It was a man's voice, hoarse, breathing hard. "Substation 12 to anyone on this band. We have 3 injured up here and the door's not holding. Can anyone copy?" Petra had the radio off her belt and to her mouth before Drews could speak. "This is Sundermark. Identify." "Vale. Riggs Vale. I'm tactical. I was running the North Corridor sweep. I'm in a server closet with 3 injured and the—" A pause. "Hold on. Hold on. They're at the door." Drews was watching Petra's face. Petra was watching the wall. "Vale," Petra said. "Are you bitten?" "Negative. None of us are bitten. Listen, the bites don't matter. It's not the bites. I've seen guys go without a scratch on them. It's the proximity. You have to—" "We know," Petra said. "Vale, listen to me. We're on sublevel 9. We're heading for the north maintenance shaft. Can you get to the shaft?" A long pause. Then, "No, I don't think so." "Vale." I'm not going to make it. The door's not holding. I just wanted somebody to know I was here. That's all." Petra closed her eyes. "Vale, this is Sundermark. I copy that. I have your name." "Thank you, ma'am." The radio went quiet. We waited. Petra waited longer than the rest of us. Finally, she clipped the radio back to her belt and looked at Drews. "Keep moving," she said. We kept moving. Around what I think was the 5.5-hour mark, we found the room. It wasn't on the way to the maintenance shaft. We didn't go into it on purpose. We went into it because the corridor we were in suddenly ended at a security door that wouldn't open even for Petra's keycard, and the only way around was a side passage that we had to take. The side passage opened on an observation gallery. It was a long room with a wall of one-way glass along the right side, and through the glass you could see down into a circular chamber about the size of a high school gym. The chamber was lit in the same deep red as the upstairs corridors. In the center of the chamber, on a low concrete pedestal, was the object. I want to describe it accurately because I have read everything that has been published about Area 51 since the event, and not one description matches what I saw. It was about the size and shape of a fire hydrant, as Pixley had said. It was dark gray, almost black. Its surface was not smooth. It had a texture like the surface of a brain, all folds and convolutions, but the folds did not move and were not, as far as I could tell, organic.
It was, I am sure now, not made of anything that wants to be looked at directly. My eyes kept sliding off it. When I forced them back, the back of my throat tasted like pennies again, and the floor under my feet seemed to tilt by a fraction of a degree that the rest of the room did not share. Around the pedestal, in a slow, shuffling circle, walked perhaps 50 people. They were not running.
They were not attacking. They were walking, in the same direction, at the same pace, around the pedestal. And they were holding hands. I do not know how else to say this. They were holding hands. The line was unbroken. The expressions on their faces, as far as I could see through the glass, were not expressions of pain or fear or rage. They were the expressions of people listening to a piece of music they had been waiting all their lives to hear. Pixley stood at the glass with his hands flat against it and his forehead almost touching it. "Oh," he said. Just that. "Oh." Morel came up beside him. She looked for a long time. Then she said, "They're praying." "Yes," Pixley said. "To it." "Yes." "Dr. Pixley," Drews said from the doorway, his voice tight. "We need to go." Pixley didn't move. "Major, I have to tell you something." "Tell me while we walk." "No, Major. I have to tell you this here, because here is the only place it's true." He turned his head and looked at Drews, and his eyes were wet. "I told you upstairs that the object began emitting at 2114. That is correct. What I did not tell you is what we did at 2112. The room got very quiet. "At 2112, Pixley said. On instruction from a director I will not name, my team initiated a low-energy directed pulse at the object. We have done this before. We have done it, in fact, on a regular schedule, 4 times a year for the last 15 years. The object has never responded. The pulse was a probe. A polite knock, if you will, on what we have always believed to be a closed door. Tonight it answered, Morel said softly. Tonight it answered. Drews did not say anything. He was staring at Pixley the way a man stares at someone who has just told him the brakes have been failing for 15 years. You woke it up, Cassian said. He sounded 21 years old in a way he had not sounded for the last several hours. You knocked on it for 15 years, and tonight it answered the door. Yes. And it's not a virus. No. It's not even an it, is it? Cassian's voice cracked. There's something on the other side of it. Pixley closed his eyes. That is my working hypothesis. I want to record what happened next as clearly as I can, because I have replayed it many times and I am still not entirely sure what I saw. One of the people in the circle around the pedestal stopped walking. Just one. The hands on either side of her stayed clasped. The chain absorbed her stop without breaking, and she turned her head, slowly, toward the observation gallery. She looked through one-way glass that was supposed to be impossible to see through from her side, directly at Pixley. She raised her free hand and she waved. It was a small wave, a friendly wave, the kind of wave you give an old colleague across a crowded room. Then she turned back, took up the pace again, and the circle resumed, and Pixley made a sound I am not going to try to render in text. We are leaving, Drews said. We are leaving right now. We left. We did not speak again until we were out of the side passage and back in the main corridor. And then we did not speak for another several minutes after that. Pixley walked at the back of the line. He was not crying, but his face had the loose,
undefended look of a man who has just had something he believed about himself proved wrong in a way he will not recover from. The maintenance shaft was another 10 minutes' walk. It was set behind a heavy steel door at the end of a corridor that Petra's keycard would not open, and which Drews shot the lock off of with a sidearm. Inside was a vertical shaft about 4 feet square, with a ladder running up one wall. The ladder went up into darkness. There was a faint movement of cold air coming down it. Real air. Surface air. I had not realized how much I had stopped believing in surface air until I felt it on my face. "How far up?" Cassian asked. 200 feet, Drews said. "That's 20 stories. That's 20 stories." We started climbing. I was in the middle of the line again, with Petra above me and Pixley below. The ladder was cold, and the rungs were rough with old paint, and the climb was the longest physical effort of my life. My arms burned. My legs shook. Cassian, 2 slots above me, was sobbing quietly as he climbed, and nobody told him to stop because we were all, in our own quieter ways, doing something close to the same thing. Halfway up, the lights went out. The emergency lighting in the corridor below us cut. The shaft, which had been lit by the bleed from below, went black. Drews's voice came up the shaft. "Keep climbing. Do not stop. Hand over hand." We kept climbing. I want to tell you what I was thinking on that ladder because I think it matters. I was thinking about Burl Kostranich offering me his badge. I was thinking about the way he had said, "Take it, you'll need it." And I was thinking, for the first time, that he might have meant it kindly, that whatever was in him had used his mouth to offer me a piece of plastic, and that the plastic might have been a way out, or might have been a way in. I will never know which. I did not take the badge. I have spent 4 years sometimes regretting it and sometimes thanking God for it, and the ratio has not stabilized. I was thinking, too, about the woman in the circle waving at Pixley, about the friendliness of that wave, about what it means that the thing on the other side of that door, whatever it is, has manners, about what kind of thing you have to have manners and also to do what it had done to 50 human beings in one room. We reached the top of the shaft. The hatch at the top was rusted and heavy, and Drews had to brace himself on the ladder and push at it with his shoulder for the better part of a minute before it gave. When it gave all at once, and a wedge of starlight came down the shaft, and I almost cried. We came out into the desert. The hatch was set in the floor of a small concrete structure that looked, from the outside, like an abandoned utility shed. The shed had a door that was unlocked. Drews opened it. We stepped out. The night air was cold and clean and tasted of nothing at all, which after the closed room smell of the tunnels was the best taste in the world. The sky was full of stars in the way it can only be in that part of Nevada. To the south, maybe a mile away, the lights of the facility were still on, mostly. Some of them were out. Some of them were flickering in patterns I did not look at for long. We stood there for a moment. Just stood. Then Drews pulled a satellite phone out of an inside pocket of his uniform. He had had it the whole time and had not used it, and I never asked why, and made a call. He spoke for perhaps 90 seconds in a low, clipped voice, using words I did not understand. He listened. He nodded. He hung up. "They're coming," he said. 20 minutes. We sat down in the dirt. All 7 of us, in a loose circle with our backs to each other. I had the box cutter still in my hand. I noticed this and put it in my pocket. Pixley was the first to speak. "I want to say something for the record," he said. His voice was almost normal again. "I don't know who is keeping the record. I don't know if there is a record, but I want it said." He paused. We did this. Not them. Not the object. Us. We knocked on the door for 15 years, and we did it because we were curious, and we did it because we were paid, and we did it because every time we knocked and nothing answered, we felt safer about doing it again. The object did not infect us. The object answered us. There is a difference. Nobody answered him. After a while, Morel said, "What about the people in the room, the ones in the circle?" "I don't know," Pixley said. "Are they still themselves?" "I don't know." If someone closed the door." "I don't know if it can be closed."
If it could be. Pixley was quiet for a long moment.
"If it could be," he said, "I think they would not be themselves anymore. I think the part of them that is still them is the part that is on the other side, listening." Cassian made a small sound and put his face in his hands. The helicopters came in low over the ridge 16 minutes later. There were 3 of them, painted matte black, and they did not turn on their searchlights until they were almost on top of us. When they did, the desert went white. Men in unmarked tactical gear came down on lines from the lead helicopter and moved toward us in a loose perimeter with weapons up. Drews stood and raised his hands, and the men nearest him lowered their weapons by a degree. Words were exchanged that I couldn't hear over the rotors. One of the men came over to me and asked me my name. I told him. He wrote it on a small notebook. He asked if I was bitten. I said no. He asked if I had been in line of sight of the object. I said no. He asked if I had been in line of sight of anyone who had been in line of sight of the object. I thought about Burl Kostranich. I thought about Yael Henneker. I thought about the woman waving. I said no. He wrote that down too. They put us in the second helicopter. I was the last in. Before they closed the door, I looked back at the facility. The lights down there were dimmer now. Some of the patterns in the flickering had a rhythm. I did not look long. The door closed. The helicopter lifted. I would like to tell you that this is where the story ends. It is not. We were taken to a facility I will not name and held for 9 days. We were interviewed separately and together. We were given new paperwork to sign. We were given numbers to call if we experienced any of a list of symptoms that included an inability to look away from reflective surfaces and a sensation of being addressed by name when alone. We were given a quantity of money in exchange for our continued silence that I will not specify, because the amount is irrelevant. Silence was not what they bought from me with that money. Silence was what they bought from me with the list of symptoms. I have not experienced any of the symptoms on the list. I want to be clear about that. In 4 years, I have not experienced one. I have experienced other things. I have experienced, for example, a tendency to wake at exactly 21:14 every night, regardless of when I go to bed. I have experienced, on several occasions, a feeling on the back of my neck that I do not have a name for, which lasts for a few seconds and then passes. I have experienced, once, the sensation of someone passing behind me in a room I knew was empty, and when I turned, there was nothing there, only the smell. For a moment, just a moment, of a closed room that has held the wrong thing inside it for too long. I do not know if these things mean anything. I have not called the number. Hespen Drews retired 3 months after the event and moved to a cabin in northern Idaho. I have not spoken to him since. I am told he does not own a phone. Petra Sundermark was reassigned. I do not know to what. Mirel Otsegovich returned to academic work under a name that is not the name on her birth certificate. I have seen her once, at a distance, in an airport. She looked tired but well. I did not approach her. Cassian Jobst left the country. I do not know where he went. I hope, with a force that surprises me, that he found somewhere quiet. Esme Bechtel died in a training accident 11 months after the event. I read about it in a casualty list I should not have had access to. I do not know if the accident was an accident. Oberon Pixley disappeared 18 months after the event. The official version is that he retired and moved abroad. The unofficial version, which I heard from a man at a bar in Las Vegas who should not have been telling it to me, is that Pixley went back inside, walked through the gate one morning at 6 a.m. with the same tweed jacket and a small leather case, and was not seen again. The man at the bar told me Pixley said one sentence to the gate guard before he went in. He said, "I have to apologize." I do not know if that's true. I want it to be true. I want it to be true the way I want a lot of things to be true about that night. I want it to be true because if Pixley went back, if he stood in that observation gallery again and put his hand on the glass and said the word he should have said the first time, then maybe, and I know how this sounds, maybe the woman in the circle stopped waving. Maybe she put her hand down. Maybe the circle slowed. Maybe the door began, by some measure I cannot imagine, to close. I do not know. I am writing this down because in 4 years no one has told this story properly. And because in 4 years the number on the list of symptoms has not been called by me. And because at 21:14 tonight I woke again, and there was, again, no one in the room. There was, again, the smell, for a moment, just a moment, of a closed room that has held the wrong thing inside it for too long. I am telling you this because I do not know what is on the other side of the door, and I do not know if the door is closed, and I do not know if I am, in any meaningful sense, still on the side of it that I think I am on. But I notice, as I write this, that the lamp on my desk, the only light in the room, has dropped half an octave in its hum, and that the shadow it throws against the wall behind me is stretched out a little longer than it should be, and that the cursor on this screen, which is the only thing moving in this room, is moving in time with something I cannot hear. I am going to stop writing now. If you are listening to this, wherever you are, whatever you were doing when you started, do me one last favor. Look up from the screen. Look at the room you are in. Listen for a moment to the hum of whatever is keeping it lit. If the hum sounds correct, you are fine. Go back to your night. I am glad for you. If the hum sounds, in any way at all, just slightly wrong, do not look at any reflective surface for the next 10 minutes. Do not say anyone's name out loud, including your own. Do not, under any circumstances, wave back. That is all I have. That is all I know. That is everything I am allowed, by whatever I have left of conscience and clearance, to say. My name is Wendrick Plone. I worked in a place that does not exist. On the night the door opened, I was mopping a corridor. I did not take the badge that was offered to me. I do not know if I should have. I do not know if any of us are still on the side of the door we think we are. Good night.